What happens when a routine stop and search leads to a shocking revelation that shatters assumptions and flips the script on authority? This is the story of Maya Carter, a composed and confident professional whose quiet evening commute at Grand Central Station took an unexpected and extraordinary turn. It was the bustling rush hour at Grand Central Station, where waves of hurried commuters moved through the iconic concourse. The air buzzed with a symphony of footsteps, distant train announcements, and the hum of engines, as the station's arched ceiling stood as a silent witness to the chaos below. Amid the sea of travelers, Maya Carter stood out not because she sought attention, but because her presence was naturally commanding. At 36, Maya carried herself with an air of quiet confidence. Her tailored black skirt, crisp blazer, and sleek leather bag hinted at her professionalism, while her steady gaze revealed sharp awareness. Every click of her heeled boots on the polished floor seemed to announce her presence with quiet authority. But that evening, her composure and professionalism were met not with admiration, but suspicion. Two police officers approached her, their eyes narrowing as they sized her up. To them, Maya wasn't a woman simply heading home after a long day. She was someone who fit a description. And so began an encounter that would leave them stunned, challenge their biases, and change the trajectory of the conversation around power and accountability. Stay with us as we unravel how Maya's sharp wit and unexpected revelation turned the tables on authority in the most unforgettable way. It was a typical evening rush hour at Grand Central Station, the iconic hub of New York City. The concourse was alive with energy, a swirling mass of hurried commuters weaving through the vast, polished expanse. The station's grandeur, with its arched ceiling adorned with celestial murals, seemed to contrast sharply with the chaotic hum of footsteps, train announcements crackling through the speakers, and the distant rumble of engines arriving and departing below. The air was heavy with the mingled scents of steel, asphalt, freshly brewed coffee, and the faint whiff of exhaust. Amid the flurry of activity, Maya Carter strode through the crowd with effortless poise. Her sharp black skirt and tailored blazer reflected her professionalism, while her neatly slung leather bag added a touch of sophistication. Her natural curls framed a face softened by subtle makeup but sharpened by piercing, observant eyes. Every step she took was deliberate, the rhythmic click of her heels echoing against the station floor like a metronome, commanding attention without demanding it. However, not everyone saw Maya as the picture of professionalism she was. Among the crowd were two police officers, Riley and Grant. Officer Riley, tall and broad-shouldered, carried himself with an air of cocky authority. His badge seemed less a symbol of duty and more a display of power, his smirk exuding arrogance as his eyes locked on Maya. In stark contrast, his partner, Officer Grant, was younger, less assured. Grant fidgeted with his duty belt, his unease evident as he followed Riley's lead, hesitant but complicit. The two officers moved toward Maya, breaking away from the stream of commuters. What happened next would not only expose their prejudices, but leave the station's crowded concourse in stunned silence. Their faces were still frozen as they gazed at the fallen security team and kept their eyes fixed on the crowd. As Maya Carter continued her steady stride through Grand Central Station, she suddenly noticed two uniformed officers cutting through the flow of commuters, their eyes fixed on her. The taller officer, Riley, moved with an air of authority, his broad shoulders squared and his smirk firmly in place. His partner, Officer Grant, followed closely, fidgeting with his duty belt as if unsure of what to do with his hands. "Ma'am," Riley called out, stepping directly into Maya's path. His voice carried a thin veneer of politeness, but the condescension beneath was unmistakable. "Mind stopping for a moment? We need to ask you a few questions." Maya paused, her heels clicking to a stop on the polished floor. She raised an eyebrow, her expression calm but guarded. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice steady, professional. "Routine check," Riley replied, his smirk widening. "You fit the description of someone we're looking for. Mind showing some ID?" Maya's gaze sharpened, her composure unshaken. "Description of what, exactly?" she asked, her tone measured but firm. Riley leaned in slightly, the arrogance in his posture unmistakable. "We'll figure that out," he said dismissively. "Step aside." He motioned toward a nearby wall. Taking a deep breath, Maya reluctantly complied, moving to the side while keeping her eyes fixed on the officers. She reached into her leather bag with slow, deliberate movements, retrieving her ID. Handing it to Riley, she kept her posture steady, her jaw tightening ever so slightly. Riley took the ID without a word of thanks, holding it up to the light as suspicion flickered in his eyes. "Federal employee, huh?" he muttered, tilting the card slightly. "Mind explaining what you're doing here?" Maya folded her arms, her voice firm but calm. "I'm on official business. Is that a crime?" Grant shifted uneasily behind Riley, his eyes darting between his partner and Maya. "Maybe we should call this in," he suggested, his voice low and hesitant. "Relax," Riley snapped, waving him off. His attention returned to Maya, his smirk resurfacing. "What's in the bag?" he asked, his tone mockingly curious. "Got anything you want to tell us about before we take a look?" Maya exhaled quietly through her nose, her irritation barely visible. Her voice remained calm but carried a clear warning. "You don't want to do that." "Oh, really?" Riley taunted, mistaking her composure for fear. Without waiting for permission, he grabbed the bag from her shoulder and unzipped it. The moment Riley's hand reached inside, his cocky demeanor crumbled. His fingers froze over a gleaming CIA badge, the gold emblem catching the station's overhead lights. Next to it rested a Glock, its matte black surface a stark reminder of who they were dealing with. Riley's face drained of color as his jaw tightened. He stared at the badge, his arrogance dissolving into visible panic. Behind him, Grant took a step back, his own face pale with shock. Riley," Grant stammered, his voice shaking. Maya remained calm, reaching forward to retrieve her bag with slow, deliberate movements. She held Riley's gaze, her eyes cold and unrelenting. "Now," she said, her voice slicing through the tension, "would you like to explain why you just harassed a federal agent?" Riley opened his mouth but stumbled over his words, struggling to form a coherent response. We thought you might be a threat," he muttered, his eyes darting away from hers. "A threat?" Maya echoed, her tone icy. "You thought a woman in a skirt and heels was a threat? Or did you think you could get away with this because you assumed I wouldn't fight back?" By now, the scene had drawn the attention of nearby commuters. A small crowd had formed, phones raised to capture the unfolding drama. Riley's earlier confidence had vanished, replaced by visible panic as the growing audience murmured in disapproval. "What?" Maya didn't hesitate. Pulling out her phone, she began recording. "State your names and badge numbers," she demanded, her voice loud and clear. Grant, sensing the gravity of the situation, quickly complied, his voice subdued. "Officer Grant, badge number 38868. Maya turned her camera to Riley, who hesitated before mumbling his name and badge number. "You like touching women's belongings during your routine checks, Officer Riley?" Maya asked, her words sharp enough to cut. "Let's see how well that excuse plays out when your superiors see this." Riley stood frozen, his earlier arrogance now a distant memory. Maya lowered her phone, knowing she had seized control of the situation and sent a powerful message in the process. As Officer Riley's hand hovered over the contents of Maya Carter's bag, the smug confidence he had worn moments earlier drained from his face. His fingers stopped, trembling slightly as they grazed the edge of a gleaming CIA badge. Next to it, resting in stark contrast to the polished leather interior of her bag, was a Glock pistol. Its matte black surface spoke volumes. This was not the possession of an ordinary commuter. Riley's jaw tightened as he silently read the words embossed on the badge. Central Intelligence Agency. His cocky demeanor dissolved in an instant, replaced by a pale, ashen expression. Behind him, Officer Grant's eyes widened in shock. He took an instinctive step back, his earlier unease now bordering on full-blown panic. "Riley," Grant stammered, his voice shaking. Riley ignored him, frozen in place. Maya, who had been silently observing the scene, calmly reached forward to retrieve her bag. Her movements were deliberate, slow and controlled, exuding the confidence of someone who knew she had the upper hand. She straightened, holding Riley's gaze with cold intensity. "Now," she began, her voice slicing through the tense silence, "would you like to explain why you just harassed a federal agent?" Riley opened his mouth, but no words came out. His earlier bravado had vanished, replaced by a stuttering attempt to justify his actions. We thought you might be a threat," he mumbled, avoiding her piercing gaze. "Threat?" Maya echoed, her tone icy. "You thought a woman in a skirt and heels was a threat? Or did you assume you could get away with this because you didn't think I'd fight back?" The scene had drawn the attention of nearby commuters. A small crowd had formed, their curious murmurs growing louder as phones were raised to record the interaction. Riley glanced nervously at the gathering audience, his panic visibly mounting. Maya didn't waver. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out her own phone and began recording. "State your names and badge numbers," she commanded, her voice firm and unyielding. Grant, sensing the gravity of the situation, quickly complied. "Officer Grant, badge number 47800, he said quietly, his voice subdued. Maya turned the camera to Riley, who hesitated before mumbling his name and badge number under her intense gaze. "You enjoy rummaging through women's belongings without their consent, Officer Riley?" she asked sharply. "Let's see how well this routine of yours holds up with your superiors, or the public." Her words cut through the air, silencing any lingering murmurs. Maya lowered her phone, satisfied she had documented enough. For Riley and Grant, the balance of power had shifted irreversibly. The woman they had underestimated had turned the tables, demanding accountability in a way they would never forget. The video of Maya Carter's encounter with officers Riley and Grant spread like wildfire, quickly making its way across social media platforms. The raw footage, capturing Riley's smug arrogance transforming into panic and Maya's calm but forceful demand for accountability, struck a nerve with viewers. Hashtags like racial profiling and accountability for all trended for days, with thousands of people sharing the video as a glaring example of systemic issues in law enforcement. News outlets picked up the story almost immediately, featuring it as a headline on both local and national broadcasts. Public outrage grew as viewers condemned the blatant racial profiling and abuse of power. In response to the widespread backlash, the NYPD announced an immediate internal investigation into the conduct of both officers. Riley was swiftly suspended, pending the outcome of the inquiry, while Grant received a formal reprimand for his role in the incident. For Maya, this was only the beginning. Using her CIA connections, she arranged a meeting with the precinct captain, presenting not only her case, but also broader data on other misconduct incidents her agency had uncovered. "This isn't just about me," she said firmly during the meeting. "It's about holding your officers accountable and ensuring this doesn't happen to anyone else." Her advocacy extended beyond the precinct. Maya collaborated with community leaders and legal experts to push for systemic changes in police training and accountability measures. She became a voice for reform, demonstrating how moments of personal injustice can ignite meaningful action. Though the ordeal had been deeply frustrating, Maya turned it into a catalyst for change. As she later received a message from her CIA supervisor commending her actions, she smiled, knowing she had made a significant impact not just for herself, but for countless others. Maya Carter's meeting with the precinct captain was as deliberate and commanding as her actions at Grand Central Station. Armed with evidence of her encounter, alongside data on broader misconduct, she made her stance clear. Accountability was non-negotiable. "This isn't about one incident," she stated firmly. "It's about ensuring that those in power are held responsible for their actions, and that these abuses don't happen again." The precinct's leadership had little choice but to take her demands seriously. Riley faced suspension, and a broader investigation into department practices was initiated. Maya's calm yet assertive approach highlighted her dedication to systemic reform, ensuring the issue was not brushed aside as a single isolated incident. Meanwhile, Officer Grant reached out to Maya privately, offering an apology for his failure to speak up during the confrontation. His voice carried regret as he admitted, "I should have done more. I'm sorry." Maya listened, her expression thoughtful but firm. While she acknowledged his apology, she made it clear that personal regret wasn't enough. "This isn't about apologies," she said. It's about changing the system so this doesn't happen again. For Maya, the experience became more than a moment of personal vindication. It was a catalyst for meaningful change. Her resilience in the face of injustice inspired many, showing how one person's courage can challenge entrenched systems of power and bias. As Maya boarded her train days later, free from interference, she received a text from her CIA supervisor. "Well done. Mission accomplished." Maya smiled, knowing that the true victory lay not in the message, but in the change she had set into motion. Standing up to injustice was never easy, but as Maya's story proved, it was always worth it.